the Monday Report. This is the Town Hall session live from the Prestige Plaza along Gong Road. Tonight we're talking about the burden of depression. The good news is that it can be managed, but you have to start by speaking. Say something. Don't let it get to the levels of attempting to commit suicide. And as much as the World Health Organization has ranked it as one of the leading causes of suicide, we're taking a bit of sampling. I'll get the questions from the audience in just a bit, but let's get one more testimonial from one Tom Osanjo. He's a veteran journalist with us here, and I'd just like to hear how it manifested and how you dealt with it. Please stand, sir. Yes, please.
Okay. I think like Eddie said, there are many factors, but one thing I realized was that I was not interested in work anymore, though I love my work very much. But there's this lethargy, a lot of sadness, and also self-medication. As Eddie said, for me, it was alcohol, as you said, until I reached a point I realized I have a problem, which that's the point when you make a decision to look for help. Fortunately, my employer was very supportive. I went to a rehab, I read it, and I came out, and now I'm helping others. And also, just let me mention this briefly. We came together as a group of journalists. Like the Major mentioned, there's a lot of reporting which is not very good on mental health. As she said, it like glorifies or makes ridicules the victims. I won't even use the word victims, but survivors. So the other thing we want to do is to talk to journalists and do training.
Yeah.
So that when you're writing a story about mental health, you don't only leave it there, but to do a follow-up. Last week, I interviewed this person. We understand the pressure of newsroom. You go do one story and move to the next.
Yeah.
But now you need to do a follow-up. Yesterday, I did a story about Eddie. How is Eddie this week? And not only that, in your story, you should also include where do people find help. Not many people. My longtime friend Mercy there mentioned about these places where you can get help. But they're not very obvious for the people on the street. My story appeared in the Sunday Nation twice in a row, and people still call me even this afternoon. They want to know where there's help. And I think Dr. Mutisia there is the one who is behind Befriend Us Kenya or something like that, which is it's a very good resource for journalists. You can get any help you want there, and you can refer people to that, people who need help.
For you, at what point did you know that you needed the help?
When I realized I just lose interest in everything, things that I used to love. I read a lot. I could pick a novel. Normally, I do 2 to 2.5 days for a 600 to 1,000 page book. But this time I could take even 2 weeks to 1 month. I realized I'm not interested anymore.
Okay.
I'm not interested in I'm a sports columnist. I was not even interested in going to the stadium to watch football so that I can write my column the following Monday.
Okay.
So that's when I realized I needed help.
All right.
And it came.
Thank you for sharing that. And I want to bring in Corinne as well. Corinne also went through the same, and she is still recovering, I believe. Corinne, what was your story like?
Well, for me, I didn't know that I had depression until 5 years later, when I realized that my first suicide attempt 10 years ago was a symptom of depression. So it's been about 10 years since my first suicide attempt, and it happened a couple of times in the first year and had happened for the next 5 years. There was always attempts, there was always pills. Similar to her story, I had about 80 pills, then 70 pills, and then just scattering whatever I would find. If I find 20 Piritons, I'll take them. If I find, it slowly became like an obsession of trying to figure out how to end my life in different ways. When you cross the road, you're like, can I just be hit by a car and die? So it was a lot of years of trying to understand what is happening. And then for me, I learned that I had depression through Google, because I didn't know where to look for help. I thought that if I was to ask family or in church, you'll always be hit with, you just need to be strong and jibebe vizuri. So later, when I was diagnosed, that was at 21. It was the beginning of now a journey to sobriety and understanding myself more, understanding how to get help. So for me, therapy has really been a very core part of my healing. I'm still battling with depression. There are moments where you can go 6 months without having any issues, but after that you can have another bombshell of about 8 months in depression, with good days and bad days. So that's been the journey so far, and it's been a daily coping mechanism. Like for me, it's an everyday decision, waking up. When something comes up, or when I'm feeling like I'm going towards the edge, I do even online therapy. There's so many solutions. As she said, there's so many places that you can find help that now we need to bring to the table.
Did you know what the problem was at that point, in hindsight, for you to get to the point where you want to take your own life? Did you know what was pushing you to do that?
I think there was a lot of issues of identity. There was not one specific issue that I can say that is the reason I got into depression, or that's the reason I want to take my life. With every suicide attempt, there wasn't necessarily an instant or a thing that happened at that moment, but it's an accumulation of a lot of things that have happened from the past into the present, because some things that happened, or trauma that happened in the past, can easily come in, and you remember it 5 years later, and that thing will keep on haunting you in different scenarios or instances.
All right, thank you so much. And Dr. Mutisia and Major, I'd like to hear from you. By the time someone gets to the point where they now just want to take their lives, what's really happening there, medically speaking?
By the time somebody wishes they are dead, or they are having suicidal thoughts, it's very severe depression, which is actually a psychiatric emergency. If somebody, you get to know that somebody is having suicidal thoughts, you need to take it seriously. And at that point, in addition to talk therapy, they will need medication, and in some severe cases, even more treatment, like what we call electroconvulsive therapy. But the good thing is, once you get the person out of the crisis, support through either antidepressants together with psychotherapy, they'll be able to move on with life. I must categorize that there are two types of depression. There is the bipolar depression and the unipolar depression, and a lot of times people look at people with depression and wonder what is wrong with you. People have worse problems than you. They forget that in some cases there is a genetic predisposition, and based on what somebody has gone through in their lifetime. Some people have had several losses, and at that particular time they get into a state of hopelessness. So people tend to judge a lot and say others have gone through that, they are managing, what's wrong with you, without realizing that it's not just snapping out of it. There's a lot which you need to understand: the biochemical changes, genetic predisposition, the environment, what happened in your childhood. And it's good for people to sympathize and link them up for treatment rather than condemn.
All right. Warim?
Well, I think to the question, how does somebody get to the point where suicide is the option? And I'm going to draw, what I'm going to say from just my experience over the years, talking to people who have survived their suicide attempts. And one of the things that became very clear to me at a very early stage is that people who attempt suicide consider taking their own lives as a solution. It is this thing that is going to make my pain go away. And we need to understand that that decision is not a rational decision, because this person at that particular point does not have the ability of seeing a solution outside of them just killing the pain completely. The lack of hope, the lack of even love for themselves. Therefore, just that sense of, I am not even worth the effort. Nobody cares. Nobody will miss me. I add no value. As a matter of fact, if I am out of the equation, it will be even better for the world.
And all this can happen without anyone noticing.
Yes.
So if you don't bring it up, then how do we solve it?
Let me tell you the thing that we should be very careful about. Not even that person who is voicing it. These people who are walking around with, high functioning depression. They are constantly busy. They are constantly working. They are constantly drinking. They are constantly hanging out. They never have a minute for themselves. And that time when they have a minute for themselves, it's just, this is me, this is not me, this just needs to end. And then people are like, but this person was always so happy, this person always used to work, this person used to manage people, what happened? So high functioning neurotics, high functioning depressed people, we really need to look out for them. When people don't have the self-awareness to be able to actually find out for themselves that, oh dear, I'm not sleeping well, I'm having suicidal ideation, I don't want to associate, maybe I should seek medical attention, but also when within an environment where people don't know what they're looking at. Because you see, that's another thing. People don't know what they're looking at. They will say, oh, they're just having a bad day, broke up with the girlfriend, lost his job, they didn't meet their targets, that sort of thing. But when somebody has had a drastic change from the way you know them, when somebody has changed even either in their body weight, whether they've lost it or they've gained it, whether this person has even changed in their self-care, because if most people who are depressed, they don't care to shower, they don't care to shave, they don't care to even wash their own bodies. Somebody will not come out of the house, like she was talking about. They're isolating themselves. But again, other people are also partying. You're like, wow, this is a bit overboard. A lot of self-medication, say in the drinking, the use of drugs, food, sex, shopping. That is also something that should be a pointer. And of course, another thing comes, so what if you know somebody who might be depressed? What do you do? The last thing you want to be able to do is approach this person and say to them, by the way, you're depressed. Can you go see a psychiatrist or a psychologist or something? We have to find the empathy inside of ourselves to approach people with love, to show them that our concern for them is actually something that is of concern to an extent that we want the best for them, and we shall even accompany them to go get a review. And we shall just stop dismissing the whole idea of mental illness as get over it.
All right. Questions? First one here. Yes.
Well,
start with your name.
I'm Moses Chalo. My question goes to the psychiatrist. So my question is, what is the most common, or rather what are the most common symptoms of depression? Because some of us could be under their first stages of depressions unknowingly.
All right.
Depending on the age, with children, it can present as irritability and misbehavior. In adults, you will discover you're feeling more sad than you used to be. You're losing interest. You don't want to reach out to people. You feel unworthy. You feel too guilty of things. You're constantly assessing yourself, and you tend to withdraw. And initially, in the initial presentations, you might be able to realize something is wrong, and it's at that early stage where you need to talk to somebody, talk to a friend, talk to a family member. And if the symptoms continue worsening, because many people don't differentiate between sadness and depression. The normal sadness will not affect your sleep, will not affect your appetite, and it will not go on every day, most of the time, for at least 2 weeks.
So there's a difference between stress and depression.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And Mercy, I'd also like to hear from you as well as a psychologist on some of the symptoms that you think we should be looking out for, coming after his question.
One of the symptoms that has not been mentioned is when you have a change of the way you think. You realize your thinking pattern has really, really changed. You used to be this positive person who always looked and knew how to look out for solutions, but nowadays you just seem to be negative. You just tend to feel defeated over everything. So that is a great symptom. The way you are thinking pattern has changed. Even the way you are feeling
though they've talked about the emotions, or rather the mood, you realize you used to be a happy, jolly person. All of a sudden, you have this deep-seated sadness, and it is not going away. You sleep when you're sad, you wake up when you're sad. Like Dr. Will mention, these symptoms, most of them, especially the sadness, is not the one that today you are just sad because maybe you lost a loved one. You cannot say that sadness is a symptom of depression. That is because you've had a bad incident today. But it's this sadness that nothing major has happened, and even if it's a loss of a loved one, for 2 weeks you are still feeling very sad, no relief at all. Okay? And then you feel you have the need to just fight with somebody. For example, you want to be violent, you want to hurt somebody, you want to hurt yourself, and you cannot explain why. Then you have this throbbing headache. You take painkillers, it's not going. You start with Mandano, you go to headaches, you go to Betapin, you go to Sido, and it's not going down. Then you know that is a symptom that it could be something that is psychological.
All right.
And you need to see a doctor.
All right. Dr. Mukuria, you have more to add? Symptoms? Or
Sure.
They've mentioned most of them.
I think, yes. A lot has been mentioned about how somebody will think, how somebody will feel, how somebody will behave. But I also want to point to what we can notice for ourselves if we have the self-awareness, or what other people can notice. And this is a very dangerous part. So you have this person who has been isolating themselves, has had all those symptoms we've talked about. Then on a particular day, they show up, they are happy, they are generous, they are positive, they throw a party, they start saying, you know, you're such a good friend, if anything is to happen to me, you can have this. That should be a very huge red flag. I think it's one of the things that people miss, that when somebody who has been in this funk, all of a sudden, without intervention, whether pharmacological or psychotherapy, without those interventions, one day just becomes overly positive, happy, optimistic, you should really worry.
Okay.
You should really worry, because what we have seen through history repeatedly is that once that phase is over, within like a fortnight or a month, these people take their own lives. Okay. And there has always been a question, but why? This person was so happy. I thought they were coming out of the funk.
Yeah.
But what I came to understand is that people become that elated because they make the decision to take their own lives, and finally they feel relief. I don't know if that speaks to anybody here. I can see you nodding. Maybe you can say something about that, but that's a huge red flag that people who are self-aware should be really concerned about, and the people watching should be really concerned about.
Okay. Eddie, unless you want to jump in, I'll take another question. All right.
In regards to symptoms,
yes, what you saw personally dealing with it.
Well, I can only speak from my experience.
Yeah.
And one lesson that I think because I look at my rising from whatever dark hole I was in as a collection of lessons which have now better equipped me to be able to deal with what I'm dealing with now. Rising does not mean that I've stopped having stress, that I've stopped being sad. I'm just now better equipped to deal with whatever I'm going through right now.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that when you're in that space, again, the societal narrative is that you are not equipped to deal with some certain things that you're going through life. One of the symptoms for me that I realized, but I did not know it was a symptom then, is that having worked in the media for such a long time, I was exposed. I was fortunate to be in a space that I knew about depression. I knew about people taking their own lives. I knew about it.
Yeah.
But when it came for my turn to deal with that scenario, I think I was lucky enough to deal with some of my symptoms in a particular way. Like, for example, I used to make sure I don't put myself in isolation.
Yeah.
I deliberately tried as much as possible. So I'd force myself into situations where I would be with people. But that was just dealing with part of the problem.
Yeah.
But one of the symptoms for me was because I found myself locking myself up in the room, switching off my phone or putting it on airplane mode so that nobody calls me.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in debt. I was constantly worried. What am I going to do about my problems? And I kept on realizing the more I lock myself up, the more I might do something drastic to myself.
Okay.
But when those moments happened, that's when I kept on thinking about, I need to end this. So I deliberately took the effort to force myself out into a place where there are people. After seeing that or experiencing that symptom, that this is what I'm going through at this particular time, and it helped a bit.
All right.
It helped a bit.
Let's take another quick break here on the Town Hall session. We'll be back with a lot more. When we come back, now we talk about solutions and open the floor to questions as well.